And welcome to Numbers Never Lie. We guarantee you it'll be the best 60 minutes of your day. Alongside Mark Schlereth, I'm Freddie Coleman. We're both in for Mike and Jamel. Coming up, how important is Sunday's showdown in Seattle between his Broncos and the Seahawks? And I'll tell you the trouble I would be in if I lost my wedding ring like one Cubs fan did last night. But we continue with the mess in Minnesota involving star running back Adrian Peterson. Earlier Wednesday morning, the Minnesota Vikings announced that Adrian Peterson will be placed on the exempt commissioner's permission list. Peterson is required to stay away from the team while he addresses the child abuse charges. The Vikings initially decided Peterson could play while the legal process played out, but then they received a whole bunch of backlash. They released a statement overnight in part reading, while we were trying to make a balanced decision yesterday, after further reflection, we have concluded that this resolution is best for the Vikings and for Adrian. We want to be clear. We have a strong stance regarding the protection and welfare of children, and we want to be sure we get this right. At the same time, we want to express our support for Adrian and acknowledge his 7+ years of outstanding commitment to this organization and this community. Adrian emphasized his desire to avoid further distraction to his teammates and coaches while focusing on his current situation. This resolution accomplishes these objectives as well. Mark, you play in the National Football League. You got a Super Bowl ring or two on your fingers. What is your reaction to what we heard overnight about the Minnesota Vikings?
Well, I think just in general, Minnesota, the league, everybody in general, it's a shame that it takes public scrutiny and public pressure to actually move you in a direction that's the right direction. As Dad used to say to me all the time, there's no right way to do something wrong. And to let a guy play with these accusations out there, to me, is completely wrong. You have to get this thing cleaned up. You have to take responsibility as an organization and as an individual. And so, I look at it from the standpoint of why does it take public scrutiny and why does it take sponsors pulling out or at the very least saying, we're not going to continue to sponsor you until you get your stuff cleaned up, before people actually start doing the right thing. That to me is a money-motivated situation from a league standpoint, from a team standpoint. And when the money starts to speak, all of a sudden you start scrambling to do the right thing. We should be doing the right thing as a league, as individuals, before we get the public scrutiny, before we have that pressure come down on us.
We know that money and power is a very seductive narcotic, especially when you're in the National Football League, when you've been the biggest thing going in professional sports the last 10 to 15 years. Let's call that as the National Football League. When you feel you're infallible and that no matter what happens, you feel that the games are going to matter.
Right.
And people always come back to the games. And we saw the ratings last Thursday night when the Ravens played the Steelers, and also the ratings for the games on Sunday and Monday involving the Colts and the Philadelphia Eagles. When you've always been on the top of that mountain, you feel that no matter what happens, we'll be able to rise above that. Well, as far as I'm concerned, last Monday with Ray Rice, and it continued with Greg Hardy with the Carolina Panthers, Adrian Peterson, now the Minnesota Vikings. To me, it has to be a meat cleaver moment for the National Football League, Mark, because things that happened before can't continue now. I don't care if they succumb to pressure from sponsors, whatever that is, fine. But from this point on, that can't be the case. If you're the National Football League, if you're Commissioner Roger Goodell, you have to be better. Not to save your job, not because you're doing this for the fans, but the fans deserve this and the players deserve this, the ones that are the good guys out there, like Troy Polamalu, the Pittsburgh Steelers, or Cam Newton, the Carolina Panthers. You can't have guys running around putting a black mark on your league constantly, and you as an NFL entity, as a Commissioner Roger Goodell, just standing by and saying, well, we have a star system, we're going to let that go because we need these guys on the field.
I keep hearing people talk about due process from a player standpoint, from an organizational standpoint, and from a league standpoint. And this is what I think about due process. Forget about it.
Right.
Due process means nothing to me. You sign a personal code of conduct with every NFL contract that you sign that says we're going to be above board. And that's what we need to be held to, that personal code of conduct. And that comes from the organizations, from the owners. We need a culture change. We act surprised or astonished when we draft a guy because he can run fast and he can jump high, that's a common street criminal, and we draft him. And then we act as though we're astonished that he goes awry of the law once we have him in our organization. And my thought process is this: start punishing everybody. To change the culture, start punishing the owners, right? You draft that guy, you don't just get to wash your hands of him and say, boy, you know what, we're going to do a jersey buyback program and spend $10,000. Did we wash our hands? We suspend him conduct detrimental to the team, and we get all that money back? Or we don't have to pay him for the rest of the time? Until owners start feeling the same pitch that players have felt for a very long time, till the organization starts feeling it, when that happens, then that's a catalyst for change. That's a catalyst for an owner to come down from his owner's box and say, guys, we're going to quit drafting common criminals. We're going to stop doing this. You know, I believe everybody deserves a second chance, but at some point, you've got to protect your entity. And it's not just about winning games and making money. It's about doing the right thing as a league. And we can do that. Due process doesn't mean anything to me. You signed a personal code of conduct. You knew what you got into when you signed it. And you're held to that standard. And we should hold our players, and the players should hold each other to that standard. Thing.
Yeah, the players have to, don't act like knuckleheads. You don't have to worry about calling out Roger Goodell on Twitter when it's all said and done. There should be a code of conduct, and players have to realize that as well. We know the Ray Rice situation is not going to go away, and the National Football League Players Association has appealed his indefinite suspension that was handed down by Roger Goodell when we saw the video last week that surfaced when he struck his then-fiancée, meaning Ray Rice. Goodell had originally suspended him for 2 games for the incident. The National Football League Players Association contends that Rice was punished twice for a single violation when all the relevant facts were available at the time of the first punishment. Here's a part of their statement. This action taken by our union is to protect the due process rights of all NFL players. The NFLPA appeal is based on supporting facts that reveal a lack of fair and impartial process, including the role of the office of the commissioner of the National Football League. You've been a part of the NFLPA. You love this game. For bad or for worse, does the NFL Players Association have a point?
Well, they certainly have a point, right? I mean, they certainly have a point. This has been botched since day one. This whole investigation, the whole punishment of Ray Rice, everything has been botched from the word go. The NFL, it's been an abject disaster. So they have a point. But again, I go back to personal responsibility as not only a league, from an ownership standpoint, from a manager standpoint, from Roger Goodell's standpoint as a commissioner, but also from the Players Association standpoint. This is our league. And our, I mean players. It's our league. It's not their league. It's our league. Nobody comes and pays money to watch Jerry Jones stand around his butt off, right? Nobody does. They come to watch players play the game, right?
Exactly.
And you have a responsibility to not act like a fool. You have a responsibility to the guys that played before you that gave you this unbelievable opportunity to play this wonderful game. So you have to be accountable and you have to be responsible in those things that you have been given. Listen, if Jerry Jones has to go make a play, first you're going to need a smoke bomb to get him out of the locker room. And when he got out there, he'd be standing in a puddle of urine. He'd be so afraid.
Really?
Yeah, you can't. Those guys,
so?
Nobody comes to watch that guy play.
Amen.
Nobody comes to watch him own. That's a huge responsibility as a player, and we have to take those responsibilities seriously. That's your responsibility. You are the face of this league. And the Players Association ought to be outraged by the way our players are representing this game and this league. Some of the greatest men I've ever been around, guys who taught me about being a father, and guys who taught me about being a husband, played in the National Football League. There's great people in this league. Charles Mann, Art Monk, Monty Coleman, right? Mark Addix. I mean, the list goes on and on. Brian Habib, Gary Zimmerman, Jeff Bostic. I go on and on. Jimmy Lachey. On and on with great men. Joe Gibbs, one of the greatest men, most regal men I've ever met, taught me a lot about being a man. And unfortunately, we have let our league forget about those standards. We have let our league just basically diminish. And there's still a lot of those guys in those locker rooms, but we have a responsibility to clean those locker rooms up, and the players have that responsibility because you guys are the ones that look like fools. You look like fools, and you need to fix it. It's incumbent upon you in every locker room to get this thing right and to hold each other accountable, because that's what being a man is about.
We should have maybe seen this kind of tide turning when they had the whole Miami Dolphins situation, because plenty of guys in that locker room stood by to allow Richie Incognito to be the bully to Jonathan Martin. Now, Jonathan Martin was culpable depending on who you talk to. Either way, if you're a real person, if you're a real man, if you're a real player in that locker room, you say, hey, that guy's being victimized. Stop doing it. That's not making him a better teammate. And if you're going to be a better teammate in the National Football League, then you're right. As players, you have to hold each other accountable. You can't just hide behind due process. You just can't hide behind money. You can't hide behind the fact that we're in the National Football League. We're better than anybody else. Those days have to be over, because if it's not over at a certain point, it's going to be a residual effect of the National Football League, and then we're going to start to see how big this league is going to continue to be.
Changing the culture, we need to change the way people think.
Absolutely.
We need to change the way people think. And listen, I know there's this sense of bravado that goes in a locker room. I get that. But we need to start embracing words like love and kindness.
Respect.
Respect. Those are words of strength in my mind, because it takes far more intestinal fortitude to love somebody, to care for somebody, to do what's right, than it does to act like a fool. Far more. And until we start embracing those things and those facts and start holding accountable each other in those locker rooms as an organization, things aren't going to change from a cultural standpoint. We need to be able to do those things. And for me, it starts with the players. It's your responsibility. You know what? And it goes over to the league and to the commissioner and to the owners, each individual owner. We have to start looking at this very seriously the way we go forward now. This has been a seminal event in the National Football League. The seedy underbelly of the league has been exposed, and America doesn't like it. And you know what? That's a catalyst for change. So in all these things, good can come of this. But we have to be willing to be honest with one another about what's going on in this league, honest about how we're going to fix it, and then we need to roll up our shirt sleeves and we need to go to work.
NFL, pay attention. If you don't, you'll be condemned for the past that you tried to forget about and move on past it. Let's move forward. Get the stuff on the field. Like Mark Schlereth's Broncos. They head to Seattle for a quote-unquote Super Bowl rematch, if you believe that sort of thing. Last time these two faced each other, the Seahawks exposed the Broncos in a 43-8 rout back in February. First regular season Super Bowl rematch since 1997. It will be the 6th all-time. Seattle is currently a 5-point favorite at home, according to LVH Superbook. I know it's week 3, Mark, but come on. Is this really more than just a game for these two?
It is. This is
even week 3.
Week 3. That's the beauty of the NFL. Every game matters, you know. I mean, the one thing about being in the NFL is every week your finger is firmly mashed down on the panic button. I mean, that's exactly. You know, you drop a game in baseball, hey, we got 162 of them. It's no big deal, right?
Right.
So in football, it's not that way. But think about this. Go all the way back to last year. They go to a preseason game in Seattle, and Seattle absolutely runs roughshod through them. John Elway comes from the owner's box down to the locker room and dog cusses the Denver Broncos for not being tough enough. Fast forward to the Super Bowl last February, right?
It's even worse.
Fast forward to the Super Bowl. They get waxed again on a neutral field, right? So everything the Broncos have done to this point has been about self-evaluation and how are we going to get better and how are we going to, the mantra in Denver, and I live in Denver, is how are we going to get tougher?
Right.
So this is a toughness situation going into that stadium, which is the hardest place in the world to play. It's so noisy. They're monitoring what they've done this offseason to see if they have in fact become tougher. And the only way that you beat a team that's as physical as the Seattle Seahawks in that crowd noise is match them physical nature for physical nature. And so that's going to tell a lot about the Denver Broncos. If they can't match that, intensity and that just physicality, then they're in trouble because they know they're going to still go through the season and win 13 games or 12 games or whatever it is, right?
That's true.
But they're going to get back to the playoffs. If they get to the Super Bowl and they face Seattle, they face another real physical NFC team like the San Francisco 49ers, there's going to be in your mind, it's going to creep in there, we don't match up well with this football team from a physical standpoint. And how do you fix that? You really
got to go out there and you can't fix toughness.
I mentioned Jimmy Lachey a while ago. Jimmy Lachey, a teammate of mine with Washington, he always used to say this to me. We'd lift every Friday after practice. You know what he'd say? 6'6", 295. You can't coach it. You're either 6'6", 295 or you're not 6'6", 295, right?
Right.
You can't coach that. And from a toughness standpoint, you're either tough and you can match physically, or you're not. And if you're not tough and you can't match them physically, you're going to get waxed in Seattle. Well, I've heard of sleepless in Seattle. You're going to get waxed in Seattle. Then you're going to be sleepless in Denver as you're worried about the rest of the season.
So basically you went sleep in Seattle, and then you had 2 sequels after that.
Right.
Well done by you from a movie standpoint. I know from the Seattle Seahawks, I'm ornery by what happened last week because we got out tough by the San Diego Chargers. People are up in arms. Oh, they got exposed. To bring some memory to your memory, the Chargers got into the playoffs last year. They had Phillip Rivers, a future Hall of Fame tight end, and Antonio Gates, and Keenan Allen was a beast last year as a rookie as a wide receiver. So I'm not surprised they lost in San Diego. But I know if I'm Seattle, after losing a game like that, there's no way I'm going to let a team like the Denver Broncos come in my house after we waxed them twice last year in the preseason and in the Super Bowl and think, you know what, we're tougher than we were last year, we're tougher than you. So I'm not saying it's an important game in terms of both teams are not going to fall apart or rise no matter what happens on Sunday. But from a Seattle standpoint, you don't want the Broncos to believe they can beat you if you meet again. If you're the Denver Broncos, all these offseason acquisitions you made, Aqib Talib at cornerback, DeMarcus Ware at defensive end, I love Emmanuel Sanders, what he's done at wide receiver. You brought those guys in mind to provide something you felt you did not have when you played Seattle. If those guys guys don't play well, toughness or not, that's going to send a message to Denver thinking, man, if we meet this team again, we don't know if we can beat them. That's going to be very interesting in Seattle this Sunday. By the way, they probably need Mark Schlereth on the offensive line if they're going to block people for Peyton Manning. Time for some numbers you need to know. The number you need to know for Greg Hardy is 64 because it's now been 64 days since he was found guilty of assaulting his girlfriend and communicating threats. Of course, he appealed and he awaits a trial by jury. Now it's being reported that the Carolina Panthers are considering having Hardy join Adrian Peterson on the NFL's exempt list. What's taking them so long, Mark?
Well, I mean, obviously he's a great football player. That's what's taking them so long is they're afraid of not having a great football player on that defense, and the fact that they pay him $700,000 plus per week, that they're going to be out of their pocket, and that's what it boils down to. It's not a decision of right and wrong. Right and wrong would be we're going to sit the guy, we're going to put him on this list until he figures out what his legal issues are and until he's got this trial by jury. So this to me is a money thing, and they need to do what's right, and they need to sit him down and put him on that same list that Adrian Peterson is on.
He has a great nickname called Kraken, but he has not been cracking good off the field for the Carolina Panthers. The number you need to know for John Abraham is 9 because it's been 9 days since Abraham left week 1 with a concussion on Monday Night Football. Yesterday, he failed to pass the league's concussion protocol, but Bruce Arians, his head coach, is hopeful he'll be cleared by Sunday. The NFL's active sack leader has been suffering from severe memory loss for more than a year. Mark, are you worried about John Abraham as I am?
Absolutely. I mean, you've got to be worried about him, and at some point you have to look at yourself and say, I know the end is here. And the end is now. And if you've been suffering with short-term memory loss for over a year, it's probably best to hang up your cleats, to hang up your helmet, and get yourself some medical attention. So, yeah, I mean, I understand that players want to play. I get that part. I've been there. I've been, injured. But this is serious. This is the rest of your life we're talking about. And so, John Abraham, I hope upon all hope that they can get him the help that he needs and that maybe it is time to look at something else with your life than football.
Yeah, prayers for you, John. The number you need to know for the Cincinnati Bengals is 3 because the latest edition of ESPN's Power Rankings are out. The Bengals jumped a couple of spots. They're now 3rd behind the Broncos and Seahawks. Mark, are you surprised to see Cincinnati ranked so high?
No, I'm not. The Cincinnati Bengals are legit. They've got great depth. They've got great athleticism on both sides of the ball, defensively, offensively. All 3 levels of their defense are stellar. Their offensive line is great. They've got great players all across the board. Giovanni Bernard is a superstar in the making if you haven't watched him. And they have great depth. They can lose A.J. Green for a game and still put up points and still put up big plays on the offensive side of the ball. The only question mark, Andy Dalton. Does he get to that next level, and does he earn the money that they paid him? And you know what? We shall see during the course of the season.
He's completed over 65% of his passes, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, has not been sacked. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. Put it this way, their defense is outstanding, and Geno Atkins is not fully healthy yet, recovering from a torn ACL. I completely agree with you. I think the Bengals are legit, and they want to prove all those naysayers wrong about them. The numbers you need to know for the Buffalo Bills and the Houston Texans are 12 and 14. Because despite 2-0 starts, the Bills and Texans ranked just 12th and 14th respectively in the latest power rankings. Are you buying either of these teams, Mark? They're hot starts, and do you think they should be higher?
No, they are about the middle of the pack. You look at both of them, the way they're playing defensively, the way they run the ball, all those things are great, but this is a quarterback-driven league. Every rule is bent to have success at the quarterback position, to throw the ball. And you've got to look at their quarterbacks and the history of their quarterbacks. They have, E.J. Manuel's a young guy that they don't put a lot on right now. At some point, he's going to be asked to win a football game. Can he do that? And then Fitzpatrick is one of those guys that is the definition of journeyman quarterback in this league. And, will he, if he has to bear the brunt of winning football games, will he be able to do that? And the answer is probably no for both of those questions. So I think that's why you see them at 12 and 14, respectively.
J.J. Watt's the best defensive player in the National Football League, bar none for the Houston Texans.
True.
Kyle Williams is the most underrated defensive player in the National Football League for the Buffalo Bills. That defensive tackle gets after it. Keep an eye on him. The number you need to know for the NFL drug policy is 20, because the NFL revised drug policy is estimated to affect 20 players, most notably Wes Welker, who is now eligible to face the Seahawks for the Broncos on Sunday, and Josh Gordon of the Cleveland Browns, whose suspension has been reduced to 10 games. Is this new deal a fair compromise when it comes to this?
Yeah, I think so. HGH testing, I think, is very important. I think it's one of those things that has been abused in all sports. And so I think it's great that the NFL has got that testing now, and I think the compromise is good. And I think for the most part, most players want to see this happen. Most players want to know that they play on a level playing field. So I believe it's a good thing. I believe the compromise is fair. And I think it's, one bright spot in a couple of weeks of just darkness for the National Football League.
And if you're Josh Gordon, young man, if you're hearing me right now, you have so much talent in the world. Don't throw it away. Don't be one of those guys where you say, I wonder what happened to. Don't have the end of that sentence be Josh Gordon. You have way too much talent to throw it away. You've got another reprieve. Make sure you do the best with that. The number you need to know for Deshaun Jackson is double deuces. That's in 22. Because all 22 Eagles interviewed by the Philadelphia Inquirer's Jeff McClain felt there was something more to Jackson's release than it being purely a football decision, as Chip Kelly, the head coach, said back in April. Now Jackson goes up against his old teammates on Sunday in Philadelphia. Mark, what is that going to be like for him?
Well, it's going to be interesting. Obviously there's nobody you'd rather beat than the guys that used to employ you. So he will certainly
Speaking from experience?
He'll certainly be motivated. And the football decision, for those guys that don't understand this, the quote-unquote football decision, that has to do with not only football but everything that goes along with football. And being part of a locker room, being the way you prepare, the way you handle yourself around others, all those things become a huge factor in that. That's part of the football decision.
Chip Kelly basically wanted all guys all in. If he felt there was somebody, a lieutenant in the locker room, that was not going to be all in, he didn't have any choice, as far as I'm concerned, to cast him aside. The Minnesota Vikings brass held a news conference at noon to discuss the Adrian Peterson situation. Early on Wednesday morning, Peterson was placed on the exempt commissioner's permission list, keeping him away from the team for the time being. Take a listen at what the brass had to say about the ongoing situation with Adrian Peterson.
We have given this issue much thought and consideration since last Friday. We have decided that the appropriate course of action for the organization and for Adrian is to put him on the exempt list until the legal proceedings are complete. We made a mistake, and we needed to get this right.
In the end, it really is about getting it right, and that's what we wanted to do here. And we made a mistake, and the main thing is we're getting it right, and that's how we came to this decision.
You say that Adrian will play again for the Minnesota.
Our focus right now today is to get this right, okay? And to, we admitted making a mistake, and we want to get this right, and we want to support Adrian, and that's the most important thing right now, is to support him through his legal and his personal matters, but we also want to make sure this is the right, that we get this right as of today.
So they made a mistake, and they want to get it right.
Yes.
That's what we got from that Minnesota Vikings. But outside of making a mistake and getting it right, are you happy with the Vikings, how they've handled Adrian Peterson?
No, I mean, absolutely not. Because I think the one question you have to ask yourself as you listen to that press conference is, would you have decided to get it right had corporate sponsorship not pulled out?
Or if his name was not Adrian Peterson.
Right. And the answer to that question is probably not. When you came out yesterday, you didn't have to come out and address the media on what you were going to do with Adrian Peterson. You had the whole week. You could have deactivated him again Sunday, right?
Exactly.
But you came out and made a statement that he was going to play. And then the backlash of the fans and the backlash of social media and everybody else just swarmed upon you to the point where all of a sudden you had to reconsider your decision. Now, they made a mistake. They mentioned that. Multiple times they mentioned that.
Right.
And they said they want to get it right. But, again, you look at it and you scrutinize it from the outside looking in saying, would you guys get this right had it not been for the pressure from the public and the corporate sponsors? And my answer is probably not. He'd probably line up and playing. And so, again, that's a systemic fail within that organization, with the NFL culture in general. And you mentioned it. If his name wasn't Adrian Peterson, if he was the 52nd or 51st guy on the roster, you know what he'd be doing? Looking for work.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they would have cut him.
Yep.
But because his name is Adrian Peterson, they're going to make concessions. And I understand that. He's a great player. And you're going to let the due process thing play out. But the due process thing, if you're going to go that direction, those guys, while that's playing out, should be on this exempt suspended list. Right? Let it play out. But you're not going to play for us until we get this rectified, and based upon what the court decides, then we're going to make a decision whether you play or not anymore. Yeah, I think that's the right way to go about it.
Yep. My dad told me a long time ago it should not be hard to do the right thing. I don't think he could have ever considered the fact that when you have that kind of money, that kind of power that the National Football League has, that they're willing to overlook doing the right thing because of a guy's star status and his celebrity.
Sure.
Adrian Peterson's still going to get paid this year. He's still going to get his $11.75 million being suspended or being on this exempt list by the Minnesota Vikings. But if a guy's been charged, he's part of a felony abuse situation involving his 4-year-old son, and who knows how many other times this has happened with his children, it should not be, well, we need Adrian Peterson on the field because we lost to the Patriots 30-7. It's like, you know what? If we put this guy back on the field, what kind of message are we sending? Because we know, as an organization, to your point, Mark, there's no way we're doing this if that guy's name is not Adrian Peterson or someone that we really need on the football field. What price paradise when it comes to situations like this? And believe me, this goes as far below as high school football, below that, where if you show a certain talent, a certain ability, you're going to be coddled, you're going to be put on a pedestal at 12, 13 years of age. Not saying that's happened with Adrian Peterson, but he's been a great player for a long time. So if you get used to that star system, and adults are doing this, then when you get to the National Football League, they're going to try to look the other way as much as possible, especially if you're a stud, if you're a star, and they need you to win games. And I think that's clearly has been the case in the National Football League, and now it's catching up to them.
Again, it's a personal conduct policy in the National Football League, and if you violate the personal conduct, then you need to have some type of penalty in place, and it needs to go across the board, from ownership to managers to coaches to players. Everybody needs to feel the pinch if we're actually going to have some effective culture change within our league. So I'm 100% on board with you on that. And the other thing you have to understand, and this was preached to me from the day I walked into the National Football League, and every year I played, 12 of them, it's a privilege. It's an honor. It's not a right. You know, the problem with America in general, in a lot of situations, is everybody knows their rights. Very few understand their responsibilities.
Or the rights of others, too.
Right. You have a responsibility as a league and as a player in this league to hold yourself to a different standard. And we have to uphold that, man. I know that the old Charles Barkley thing is, I'm not a role model and all that. Yeah, you are. You live in a fish tank, right? Everybody watches you. Everybody scrutinizes every move. And you have to be above board. And if you're not, then you have to not only be penalized, but you have to hopefully get the help you need to change your life. And I believe in giving guys those opportunities, but that's full circle. This league has to be involved in every step of the way to grow and nurture young boys into manhood. And that needs to be an emphasis.
I used to think that athletes should not have to worry about being role models. In this day and age, I've completely switched my line of thinking because there are too many young men and young women that look at the athletes in sports, no matter what they play. And if we're not setting that kind of example, parents have a hard enough job as it is to try to raise their kids. And Charles Barkley was right. I shouldn't raise your kid. But if you set a great example, why not have that example for kids to aspire to instead of the other way around? I've completely switched my line of thinking on that one. Speaking of controversy, let's move the conversation to the man presiding over all this controversy. That'll be NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell. He appeared in a CBS interview before last Thursday night's Ravens-Steelers game. But since then, it has been no communicado. He's kept himself out of the public eye. He had planned to attend the 49ers home opener at the new Levi's Stadium on Sunday, but ended up being a no-show. Should Roger Goodell be more visible? Because no matter what he says, no matter how much controversy surrounds the NFL, people are going to take it, and it seems to me, Mark, they're going to spin it in a negative fashion against him.
Yeah, I think at this point, from a damage control standpoint, he's probably better off not being visible. I mean, he did himself no favors going on TV on CBS, and it seemed to be, less than what it should have been. I mean, it
was ambiguous. That's the word he used with Ray Rice.
The word he used with Ray Rice, ambiguous. I don't know what was ambiguous about the video of him dragging her out of that elevator. There was no ambiguity there for me. But, he did himself no favors. He came off looking as though he was covering up, as though he was hiding things. It was horrible. And this has been a horrible public relations nightmare for the National Football League. So at this point, putting him back out in front of everybody, I don't think does you any good as a league, and it does him certainly no favors as well. Again, credibility becomes the issue.
Absolutely.
Freddie, credibility, I mean, think about sports in general. You know what? When you think about Barry Bonds, do you think about one of the greatest players of our generation, or do you think about PEDs?
PEDs.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Roger Clemens, same thing. You go Rafael Palmeiro. This is what you think of right there, right?
Absolutely.
That's what you think of.
That's very fair.
And so Roger Goodell, anytime you go out in front of the public, in front of your fan base, as the face of this league, people are going to look at you and they're not going to have, you don't have the credibility you once had because of the decisions you have made in the last couple of weeks. And so that's hard. It's hard, I think, for any fan to look at him and think of the NFL and not think about what's gone down here the last 2 weeks. So from a credibility standpoint, they're in a really, really tough position. And that will go, it's a shame, that will go with him for the rest of his career. And here's the part that's a shame. It's terrible to be defined by your worst moment. That's a terrible thing, but that's the way the world works. It's not fair. As you always tell your kids when they're growing up, life ain't fair.
Right.
Get used to it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, that's where we are right now in a credibility issue. They've got a real credibility concern with the commissioner of this league right now.
Roger Goodell is an intelligent man. You don't get to be really dumb and run the National Football League or Major League Baseball or the NBA. People can say what they want about Roger Goodell. He's a very bright man. He's a very intelligent man. But boy, oh boy, has he been part of a lot of dumb things because of his own doing, because it has not been handled consistently, in my opinion.
I don't think it's dumb. I think it's arrogant.
Okay. Oh, that's right. All right.
I think you have gotten to the point where you think you are Teflon.
That's fine. That's fair. Yep.
Where you think everything you do, it works out perfectly. And so you've gotten to the point where you're arrogant, like regardless of what decisions we make, they, if you build it, they will come.
Right.
Well, eventually, right now, what the NFL has learned is we're not as Teflon as we thought we were.
Yeah, that arrogance has to go away because that arrogance becomes ignorance if you are Roger Goodell in the National Football League. Number one, Florida State announced today that Jameis Winston, the Heisman Trophy quarterback, will miss the first half of the game this weekend against Clemson as punishment for reportedly jumping on a table and yelling an obscene phrase in the student union. The school called the comments offensive and vulgar. Coach Jimbo Fisher said it was not a good decision, quote, end quote. Mark, your reaction.
It's disappointing. I mean, I bumped into Jameis Winston at the ESPYs. He came up, introduced himself to me. Couldn't have been kinder. And I told him at that point, I said, listen, man, I don't want to talk about you other than what a great football player you are. So don't do stupid things.
Right? And how did he respond?
Yes, sir. I mean, he was very, very respectful. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And here we are again talking about Jameis Winston and not talking about his football acumen or the stats that he's putting up or the leadership that he displays on a football field. We're talking about a stupid stunt. And, it's a shame because for me, if I'm a general manager and I'm building a football team, that guy can't lead my football team. I look at what he does and the way he conducts himself off the football field, and I'm like, no, I don't want any part of it. And I hope that this latest thing is an event in his life where he actually starts to understand how important he is to that university and the responsibility that he carries being the quarterback in the face and the Heisman hopeful that he is. I hope he understands that, and I hope he acts accordingly and changes the behaviors off the football field, because it just shows an incredible lack of maturity and understanding of the responsibility you have as a quarterback at Florida State University.
I read the story on Deadspin, and one student who was unnamed was mentioning the article about what Jameis Winston said. You know what? That is what makes him likable to us, because he's just like us. No, he's not.
Right.
Just because you're attending Florida State does not mean that you and Jameis Winston are the same. Yeah, he's still a kid. I know he still is matriculating at Florida State University, but he is a celebrity. And when celebrities do or say stupid things, you can do it as a college student. Nobody knows your name. Nobody cares. Jameis Winston does it in light of what we've seen in the National Football League when it comes to code of conduct lately in the last month or so. And with Jameis Winston, what he has been involved in the last year or so, even during and winning the Heisman Trophy. So at a certain point, if you're Jameis Winston, if it sounds funny in your head, doesn't mean it's going to be funny coming out of your mouth. If it sounds stupid in your head, then it's going to sound even dumber coming out of your mouth. You're in a situation where you can't afford to have any more slip-ups, any more mess-ups, any more transgressions, and you can't just pawn it off as, well, he's in college, well, he's a college kid, and they do those things. They can do those things. You can't if you're Jameis Winston.
Have you not watched the news? Have you not had this network on? Are you that tone deaf that you don't understand the overall effect that doing something like that can have on you come draft time? You're that tone deaf. You don't understand. You're that clueless to what's going on and the culture of this league right now.
Exactly.
Come on, man. You've got to be better than that.
Yeah, guys have got to stop. Not just Jameis Winston, but anybody. Stop being SOS, stuck on stupid. Because at a certain point, it's going to hurt you further down the line. It's not going to hurt any of those college kids you're hanging out with.
Right.
And yeah, this is all fun and games. They'll be a part of the fantasy football league, not the National Football League that you potentially have a chance to be if you're Jameis Winston. Why do this constantly over and over when it seems like he's a very likable kid? You had a chance to meet him.
He was great. He was respectful. All those things. Quit making bad decisions.
Right. Oh, my goodness. At a certain point, Jameis Winston, you're too good of a person, from what I've seen on the outside, to put yourself in situations just because you think you're having too much fun. You have to be better than that, especially winning a Heisman Trophy and representing college football. In the National Football League, how about them Cowboys? The Dallas Cowboys avoided an 0-2 start. They beat the Tennessee Titans 26-10. They had 220 yards on the ground. Tony Romo did not throw a pick after throwing 3 the week before in a Week 1 loss to the San Francisco 49ers. Jerry Jones, who has no problem saying what he feels, he has no problem with this formula going forward. He told 105.3 of the fan in Dallas, when you can have more of a balance, which means that you're not sitting there with a high ratio of passes by Tony Romo, then I think we're seeing you have a better chance for your defense to be more effective, play less plays, better field position. So the way we played Romo the other day fits me just fine and fits him just fine. It's called winning, and that's what we're here for. Wow, what a revelation. Right. Are the Cowboys better, I guess, when Tony Romo does less?
Absolutely. I mean, you know what?
From the Department of Redundancy, right?
Yeah, we've only been preaching it for the last 10 years.
Exactly.
Right?
Where you been, Jerry?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, listen. Anytime you can run the football, you can control the line of scrimmage, you control the clock, you can shorten it, especially when you've got question marks on the defensive side of the ball, you're going to be better off. You're going to be a better football team. It's going to keep those guys fresher, so you don't have to rotate as many players. And we've all looked at that defense and said, wow, they're kind of bereft of talent in a lot of positions where you need to have talent. I will say this, they played pretty well. We'll see.
Right.
We'll see going forward when they start getting some high potent offenses out there, some big time offenses out there. But right now, to this point, they've played pretty well, and you've got to tip your hat to Rod Marinelli to get them, the defensive coordinator, to get them prepared to do this. But yeah, that's a great scheme. I mean, they've got the strength of that football team right now. It's not Tony Romo. Right, the strength of that football team really is that offensive line.
Absolutely.
They are outstanding up front, and they dominated the line of scrimmage. And DeMarco Murray running that football, that dude's a full-grown man. Right? I mean, he will put his bean on you, and he will move the pile forward. So those are great things, and it opens up everything for you. Play action, everything else. Your quarterback doesn't have to take chances down the football field. Everything was underneath. They didn't take shots down the football field. They didn't need to. They threw some slants. They threw some shallow crossing routes, things that are easy to complete because they ran the ball so effectively. So tip of the hat to the Dallas Cowboys. After 10 years of butting your head up against the wall, you finally learned something.
It must kill you as a former Washington football player to give any credit to the Dallas Cowboys. That's number one. This show is called Numbers Never Lie. I'm going to give you some stats. Tony Romo is 23-8 when he attempts less than 30 passes. He's 41-38 when he attempts 30 passes or more. From the department, when you come to the Dallas Cowboys, Tony Romo may be whatever Jerry Jones wants him to be. But Jerry Jones has to realize, you know what, there's only so much he can do. And I still wonder, Mark, if he's still 100% healthy from the offseason back surgery. So why are you going out there and having him throw the ball all over the park when he really didn't have to against the San Francisco 49ers? Yeah. Now, we know they're better than the Tennessee Titans on defense, but it should not have taken 3 interceptions in the first game for you to say, let's not throw the ball as much, because that's not a recipe conducive to winning with the Dallas Cowboys and Tony Romo.
The good news, we can be taught.
The bad news, we'll see the Cowboys can be taught. Time for some numbers you need to know. The number you need to know for Charles Barkley is 33,812. That was the attendance for the Cubs game Tuesday, and for Barkley's sake, hopefully most showed up late as he threw a less than stellar first pitch prior to the game. It was terrible when it was all said and done. What do you think about Charles Barkley's antics on the mound?
I mean, I've seen a lot worse. I mean, it wasn't 50 Cent bad, right?
Oh, nothing's that bad.
Yeah, true. So, I mean, you know what? That's good for Charles. I just want to say, are you sure you're right-handed?
I want to know what's worse, the first pitch or his golf swing. I think it could be 50-50 there.
Oh, no. The golf swing's
golf swing?
way worse than that. The golf swing's way worse than that.
Wow, if that's way worse, yikes. Either way, Charles Barkley, you may be terrible on the mound, but you're a Hall of Fame basketball player, no doubt about that. The number you need to know for the Orioles and Nationals is 3, because yesterday was just the 3rd time in Major League Baseball history that 2 teams from the same metro area each clinched the division on the same day. Which team do you like to make a run between those 2 on the Beltway?
Wow, that's a great question. I would go probably the Nationals is the team that I would probably go with as far as making a run on the Beltway. But, the Chris Davis thing I think is really going to hurt them. I know his batting average is only like 173 or so, but you can't deny the power that Chris Davis has in that lineup. So I think that's going to hurt them as a playoff start.
The Orioles are not afraid of anybody. They love that less than respect they've got from the national media. All the time people hit me on Twitter, Coleman, ESPN, when are you going to love our Baltimore Orioles? I'm like, I love your team. Nobody else may not, and the Orioles may use that as motivation. The number you need to know for Kobayashi is 6. Kobayashi has won 6 Nathan's hot dog eating contests in a row. He challenged this hamster to a hot dog eating contest. We're not making this video up. The hamster, of course, was eating little tiny hot dogs as he was wiping out Kobayashi.
Whoa.
Who knew?
Right. Well, that's not fair. Look at that hamster's cheeks. Look at the size of those things.
Not fair in a hot dog eating contest?
Not fair at all. I mean, Kobayashi's got some cheeks, too, but you can put a lot of hot dogs in those hamster dogs in those cheeks.
The worst part is, every person and their kids watching this program, their kid's going to say, "Ooh, I got to get a hamster. Let's feed them hot dogs, Mom and Dad." You know that's going on, that conversation right now.
You know what? It's unfair, too, because Kobayashi has water to dip his in. Where's the hamster water? You know what? I'm concerned about this little hamster. He's probably worked up a powerful thirst eating all them dogs.
Come on, he's on a wheel all day. He should be hungry. He doesn't need water. Just wipe him out.
Dude, that hamster didn't spend a lot of time. He spends a lot of time on the couch, not on the wheel. I guarantee you that.
Are you saying that the hamster needs to go through a 12-step lose your weight program?
I'm saying that hamster needs to get some exercise because that's one chubby hamster.
Well, at least he has the medal. Either way. The number you need to know for a Cubs fan is 7. In the 7th inning of Tuesday night's Cubs game, a fan went after a home run ball, but lost his wedding ring while going for the ball. He reportedly got the ring back. Scary moment there?
No, I mean, come on. Really? I haven't worn. I broke my finger when I was playing in 1996. Haven't worn a wedding ring since. And as I always say, that wedding rings are obsolete.
Really?
Yeah, I've got a cell phone. My wife knows where to reach me at all times. So,
if I lost my wedding ring, I'd be in Chateau de Bow Wow, meaning the doghouse.
Really?
If I lost my wedding ring. Believe me, it would not.
I don't need a wedding ring to remind me